They want me to change, they want me to change, but I ain't changing, nah. I remain the same.
And you are now tuned into another episode of Intellectually Petty Radio, brought to you in concert with A Beautiful Machine magazine, as well as the mighty Nerd DJs Radio Networks. You already know redundancy at its finest, week after week, month after month, year after year. We only rock with legends around here, and today is absolutely no exception. We have the pioneer of sustainable culture, the United Nations FAO food hero, an overall modern day superhero to Americans and those across the galaxy alike. We have Miss Pashon Mary. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. How you doing? How's your family doing?
Oh, thank you for asking. My family, they're doing well. I just spent, let's see, 4 days in Grand Rapids, and so it was good to see my parents and my brother and all his children over the weekend. But yeah, everybody's good. I'm good. I'm the sole survivor over here, you know. Uh, on the solo. We come together when we can, but I'm the only one over here in Detroit. Yeah.
What made you move to Detroit?
You know, uh the melanin vibrations, the culture here. Growing up, my parents, I have the typical migration family where, we're Mississippi, we're the deltas, we're the south of Mississippi, the southern part, we're Louisiana, we're Arkansas, and we are on the southeast coast. We're in Atlanta, we're in the Bay, we're in LA, we're in throughout Michigan, Memphis. We kind of spread out all throughout the country. But when I attended Grand Rapids Christian, I played basketball, grew up as an athlete, soccer, basketball, all that good stuff in Grand Rapids. But when my parents took me to New York and Chicago, LA, where all our family was all throughout the South, I always had love for Detroit. And, what I really love the most is when I was attending Texas Southern, all the Detroit people was like, she's from Detroit. She's from Detroit. So I was like, no, but it was like, don't say Grand Rapids. I'm like, but that's where I'm from. Grand Rapids has a lot to do with who I am. But no, I always loved the people of Detroit. It was always attractive for me because I felt like in the media, Detroit never, from my personal perspective, I felt like people around the country, if they hadn't been here, there were misconceptions about the city. They know the music and cars, but I was like, you guys are missing so much of the moral fabric and the culture, the arts, just the spirit of the people.
Detroit's
Like,
beautiful.
yeah, it's a beautiful city. I always had love for Detroit, even though I grew up in Grand Rapids. Like I said, my mother and I, especially, we would come over here all the time and spend the night, couple of nights. There's family here and there, for the most part, but I love the culture and the people, the spirit of the city. I just think there's so much talent and ingenuity here, and that is not what's portrayed in the media. Yeah.
Oh, do you hear? I'm sorry, but do you hear some like feedback? Because I'm hearing some shit over here, and it's driving me crazy.
Let me see.
And I don't know. Okay, it kind of went away. All right, so maybe I'm tripping. I'm old.
It's okay. I just want to make sure my phone or nothing is like on or anything, but
And actually, I just heard it again, so I'm not sure what that was, but every so often it's almost, anyway. What is sustainable culture?
so when you think about sustainability, when you think about the term, I think it became very popular about 20 years ago because a lot of people were associating sustainability with um, more of when I was growing up and in business school, it seemed like an economic term more so
Hmm.
of being able to sustain economically. But in my early 20s, like when I moved back, actually mid 20s to Grand Rapids, they had this whole culture around building with the environment, aligning with the environment,
Hmm.
using certain materials for building, being conscious of the environment. So it encompasses all of these things, right? It's really about the culture of making sure the environment is at the core of everything that you do. So when you think about your spiritual wealth or your spirituality, it's tying nature to that, respecting nature. When you think about what food you eat in agriculture, you want the cleaner sources of food because that's the fuel for your body. That's what's linking you back to the nutrients in the ground, right? So it
Hmm.
encompasses all those things. It's like also when you look at it from an economic perspective, the circular economy or the sustainable or sustaining the economy means that we're trying to be the most efficient. We want to think in a way or have a certain mindset where, if you're purchasing a table, your couch, your clothes,
Hmm.
think about where it comes from, how it was made. All of that is the culture of sustainability. It's just keeping in mind that nature, aligning with nature, and making a conscious decision on whether you should purchase something that was fast fashion or something that's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it's going to last longer, right? So it's,
Hmm.
it's really just, I advocate for the culture of sustainability because I want people to think about generations to come, and those decisions are integrated in everyday life with whatever we do.
What country gets it right, in your opinion?
Hmm?
What country gets it right, in your opinion?
So there's a long list, but I think the Europeans, because their countries are smaller,
Hmm.
their transportation is they have mass transit. So you can hop on the train and go from country to country. Usually their markets are within walking distance, right? So you can
Hmm.
go and you can bike to go and get your food from the local market. A lot of their technology, as far as, when we talk about solar and investing in infrastructure in the United States, a lot of those countries in Europe, Denmark, Germany, Sweden, they've already banned plastic bags in Belgium and different places, right? You don't have any
Hmm.
plastic bags there. You don't have any waste, if you will. So the living this more efficient life and being conscious of what you do, I think that they've done an outstanding job. But I also think third world countries where you don't have as many resources believe in sustainability as well because they don't have access. So you have the countries who have invested in the infrastructure, but you also have those who are just reliant upon the bare minimum of life. They have to walk, they have to build with what they have. I think Canada does a great job. And I also think that South America,
Really?
Brazil, a lot of those countries, they are investing in the future, right? They're looking at what are the alternative ways for us to survive in this economy, or how can we live and sustain. And so those are just some of the countries I traveled. The first country I went to when I was 16 was Japan, and my mind was blown off the culture, how clean, how efficient. It may take us 15 or 20 minutes to get somewhere in a car. On that train, they can get there in a matter of minutes, right?
Hmm.
So their TVs, their technologies, their environment, how they take care of it's a cultural thing. And I think that's we're not there yet in the United States. There are pockets throughout the country, but that's where we need to be headed.
I don't think this country wants us to be there.
I agree to a certain extent. And when I say that, I just think that there's some laziness, because if you really think about the infrastructure, let's just I was at a conference, the Michigan Healthy Climate Conference. I was at Huntington the last couple of days. They wanted to talk about, the sexy stuff, the solar panels, the environment, the EV vehicles. When you start exponentially, to me, like when you grow and you're going from A to C, and then you jump and go to F or whatever. In between, there are incremental small changes that you can actually adopt to, right? And so
Right.
I think that we've missed when we keep sending things to a landfill. I'm just going to use that as an example. There are ways to create energy and cleaner sources of fuel, as well as other byproducts. But if you don't have the policies and the ordinances in place to hold people accountable or to mandate things, they're not going to do it. A waste company in Michigan is going to keep sending things, delivering waste and burying it in a landfill, because the policies aren't necessarily mandating them. But in another country or in California, the Californians, their policies support sustainability, energy efficiency, net zero. Their corporations, it's a concerted effort, it's a collaborative public private partnerships. We have to be willing to do that. And I think the misconception is, oh, well, we can continue to use fossil fuels because it's just cheaper. And it's like, at the end of the day, there are cleaner sources of fuel. But if you're going to pause research on how to create sustainable aviation fuel, or if you're not going to create or implement subsidies for some of these other industries, then why would people do it? But in other countries, it's law, right? It was like the seatbelt, smoking. You have to begin to create policies that are going to mandate these things. And I think at some point we're not going to have a choice. Like right now, they're already discussing the policies at the state level, because a lot of power is going to come back to the state with this current administration. And right now, I'm just going to say in the last year, when the Biden administration was exiting and getting ready to, they didn't know, of course they chose Kamala Harris along the way, but they wrote a lot of policies. So some of us now who have funding or who took advantage of technical assistance programs or whatever, that administration was responsible, for creating policies around a lot of the work that the environmentalists like myself and the conference that I went to the last couple of days, they're focusing on efficiency, right? Supply chain, but you got to have the right leadership in place as well. That's going to break the economics down, right? And teach people and translate this information in a way that's relatable to all people. Because who has the time to really think about, everything that I was speaking on earlier on what you're purchasing, what you're buying. But if it's relatable, if it's a part of the culture, if we're saying, let's ban food waste from going to the landfills, let's stop using all this plastic, then alternatives will come. Jobs can be created, the workforce will be developed. You know what I mean? So we have to be willing to invest in the change and stop.
So you said
Go
so you
ahead.
said don't put food in the landfills.
Hmm.
Where would it go?
So right now, today, we send about 30 to 40% of our food when we throw it away. And it's the food processors, grocery stores, farms, anybody that is basically attached to food. When you look at that number, that 240 billion dollars, equivalent to 30 to 40% of a landfill, right, across the country. That's where it's going, because when you scrape something off of your plate, or when the grocery store, if they have if anything happens, if there's a shortage in a freezer and they have to take all that, if a truck is coming across the border from Canada or Mexico and they get held up. That food only has a certain shelf life. So
Right.
when you start breaking down the supply chain and the distribution centers and where all the food comes from, you'll begin to see that with studies, research especially reveals the data that, you know, I think 30 to 40% is a conservative number, especially when you think about how much food is produced, right? But then you think about 1 in 7 Americans are food insecure. So we got all these hungry people or people who might be impoverished or categorized as being impoverished. When you look at the imbalances of how we manage our food systems, there's a disconnect there. Again, this is culturally something that we're missing the mark on. They don't connect that to climate change. Most people aren't going to go, oh, when food is buried in the ground instead of managed properly, it gives off greenhouse gases, which causes warming, right? So,
Hmm.
some of the things that can be done, there are technologies that exist that if it's not consumable, like if you can't eat it, if it's not edible,
Hmm.
then we should be looking at waste to energy, right? So if it's something that you can't eat or I can't eat, then and it's just rotting, it's wasted, it's either going to be contaminated and contributing to an issue, or it can go through a process with technologies like digesters, biodigesters, pyrolysis, where they break all this material down, right? And you can harness the gas from it. You can make energy. You can make fertilizers. So it's all in what practices we have in place. Like, but policy again is going to drive a lot of this. But every aspect of food, the food system, there's so much waste. And I think 30 to 40% is a very conservative number. I grew
Hmm.
up going to the landfills, and we're just a wasteful society,
You just
honestly.
was hanging out at landfills?
Huh?
You were just hanging out at landfills?
My dad, my dad was a contractor. He owned a small business in Grand Rapids. He took the buyout from General Motors, but then, um, so seasonal contracts with the city and the county for waste removal, snow plowing, industrial mowing, interior demolition. Um, he, he was diversified. He can do a little bit of everything, but
Mhm.
he, a veteran, went to the Air Force, machine repairman. He was a pretty knowledgeable guy. So before school would start, sometimes I'm driving in the truck with him. He always had about 10 to 12 guys, a crews that worked for him.
Hmm.
And I was just always exposed to that. I could be on a construction site. I could go as a child ride out to the landfills with him with a roll off truck. He might drop me off in one of the trucks that he was driving. The kids always thought that that was cool. It was a regular thing for me to get dropped off in the snow plowing truck or a roll off roll off truck or dump truck. That was a part of my life.
Okay, so I think with our meat system, I think we're all kind of more familiar with the steroids and the stuff that they feeding them, and the ills of that system. But are we undervaluing what they're doing to our vegetables?
Yes. Yes.
And what would you say, like if you had your druthers, you're the president, how would you fix the vegetable aspect? The first thing you would do.
First thing I would do is I would not pause on research. I would, I would certainly allow all the experts around the world who are working on healthy soil, because
Hmm.
our soil, it's imperative that we have healthy soil, number one. And two, what are we doing to our soil, our harvest, our farms, right? Because years ago, all the chemically based products, they didn't exist, right? But in
Hmm.
the 40s, the 50s, as farming progressed, they wanted to accelerate process, right? You want your chickens, your pigs, your cow, whatever you're doing, you want to mass produce. It's the same thing with harvest. They started utilizing a lot of chemicals to accelerate the growth. Well, that started helping, adding to the issue of deteriorating the soil, right? And so at the end of the day, if we don't have the best practices where we are looking at the balance of how to take care of our soil, because our food comes from the soil, it's like the bacteria that's in the soil.
Hmm.
That same bacteria is in our gut. It's imperative that, you know, listen, antibiotics, penicillin came from, soil studies. There's so many, when you think about research and you think about how important it is to understand the soil, to understand nature, because what a grape, like if you're harvesting grapes, in Napa Valley, you're trying to make the best wine possible. You're going to make sure that your soil is taken care of, that it's organic, if you can, that you're using less chemicals. You want to make sure from the time those seeds go into the ground into harvest that you're producing the best product. Now, some companies promote that hey, we're organic, our soil's organic, but a lot of vegetables we don't know, especially when there's no traceability and no accountability for it. It's coming from, 1,000 miles away. Now I think more farming organizations and certifications are coming about now where, they have to utilize these standards, right? And
Hmm.
guidelines around how they should be growing, vegetables and whatnot. And that's critical, right? Because it used to be years ago, a cup of vegetables or a cup of fruit a day and you're good to go. Now it's like it would take about 3 or 4 cups, maybe 5 cups of
That's
vegetables.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah, because they're losing their nutrients. It's like that's what's most devastating, and that's why I think we should start growing what we can
Hmm.
locally as well, because Michigan used to be not just in the rural areas, but in the urban areas, we had a lot of farms, and so we can grow our own herbs, whatever it is that we can grow within a circular economy, like locally and keeping it local. That's powerful as well, and I think that a lot of countries they practice, growing locally as well, and so I hope that more soil scientists will be respected. And I respect them because I'm in this space, but I wish more people would listen to the universities, the subject matter experts around this, because it's imperative that we take care of the soil, because what's in the ground essentially is in us. What we eat, we are what we eat.
So, is there a speculation or studies that say if we don't change anything and we continue on this same path, we have 150 years?
Yes, yeah. That's a great question, because I credit the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, and just the UN in general, their Sustainability Development Goals, which are SDGs. They've done a great job at coming together with, um, I'm going to say, a meeting of the minds
Hmm.
for decades, where they pulled together subject matter experts, and the research that they produced and the data that reflects everything from migration patterns because of climate change to, um, what areas in the world have healthy soil and how many harvests do we have. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I would say even longer than that, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, the UN, they shared a study where they said that we had on average about 60 years of harvest in certain, most majority of the world, that had, this healthy soil. And
Hmm.
whether that may be weather permitting, because of, in some areas there's a lot of wind, there's a lot of storms, soils are depleted, with a lot of flooding. Like Michigan has some flooding, other coastal cities have flooding. So when you take up those nutrients and those, that 1 or 2 layers of soil, then you start adding to another issue, right? Because there's
Hmm.
a the biodiversity, everything feeds off of each other, is aligned with each other. So when you look at the microbiome and, you start looking at these little, it's a whole nother world up under our feet. But when you look at, you know, everything that is in those microorganisms, just for an example, that live in the soil, when you start to disrupt that, then you're going to have an off balance in the soil. So, we're in a crisis. We've been in a crisis. And what's important now is for most of us who have healthy soil or access to it, it's
Hmm.
imperative that we sustain as much as we can and that we remediate soils. And so that's where composting comes in, because at the end of the day, when you start preparing or adding that layer of compost, you can help with water storage, with the microorganisms.
Hmm.
All of that is imperative that we practice and promote these things and bring awareness to it. But it's something that most people, they just don't think about these things, rightfully so, and I understand, but it's a
I
way of life.
I think it may be a disconnect with the environmentalist movement in that I think sometimes the truth is, I think the movement believes that the truth is enough. And in today's society, most of us are just stupid. So we need superstars. We need simplified shit. And I think once we get to, we haven't got there yet, but we'll get to a point where we really, the need is more highlighted, and there will be somebody that will come from that community that is able to be like a superstar, to make it easy to digest. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair. Um, and we have to uplift the leaders in this space, right?
Hmm.
Because there are agriculturalists, there are, soil scientists, farmers, and communities all across the country, and our stakeholders and our leaders, we need to, when you think about the city and the county, they need to be able to identify those five or six experts, right?
Hmm.
That I always say put the hip hop and R&B in it, make it relatable,
Yes.
translate the information so, most people can understand, right? I spent so many days for about 10 years of my life traveling everywhere, just talking about the soil. More importantly, a lot of people, they caught that 60 seconds in that ad. I was in a Ford ad. They caught that message, right? They
Hmm.
captured it. They were able to comprehend it. And they were like, oh, we need to know where our food comes from. It's important that the soil, we understand that healthy soil, we should all have healthy soil. We should all have access to food. You know, when you have leaders who understand the dynamic of what is needed, the science, fine, all day long, the science supports it. The research supports a lot of the work that we're doing, but you need certain people who have the knowledge that can make this and
Yeah.
translate this information.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to hear about 1 degree Celsius or, the science of it. You have to be able to say, look, know what products you're purchasing when you go to the grocery store, because when you put that in your body, invest in a cleaner source, or make sure you're purchasing something that's organic, or go to Eastern Market on the weekend and buy from the farmers, because 9 times out of 10, the probability of those farmers making sure that they're selling you a great product,
Hmm.
they believe in that, because they're farmers, right? They want you to have the best apple. They want you to eat the berries that are coming from their soil, because they're taking pride in this. And a lot of them have struggled for through generations, family farming, more less. I'm going to say the last 2 generations of
Hmm.
farmers, Just like they're dying
Horrible.
off, like
Yeah.
the average age, I think, is in their 60s now, you know?
It doesn't. It's not sexy, and it doesn't seem to be making money, at least from what they say publicly, and especially amongst black farmers, they have gotten shitted on for decades,
Yes.
centuries. If you, I mean, I don't know how far you want to go back. Since the black farming started, that was, quote unquote, we were free. How do we? Is it possible to get the next generation to buy in?
I believe that it is. And so if we're willing to invest in infrastructure, right? And build these bridges between the rural areas and the urban areas, we have to build pipelines as well, right? Because
Mhm.
those subsidies that a lot of the government was pushing for so long to get farmers to grow something specifically, knowing that you should be diversifying what the farmer should be growing, but you want them
Yeah.
to grow something specific for mass production for whatever it is, whether it's soy or corn or whatever. We should be promoting and diversifying our farming because the apple orchards, I'm just going to use this for an example, or the grapes in the Traverse City area, those people will take pride if the investment is there and they know the government is going to help them. Now you mentioned the market has to be there, right?
Hmm.
We have to rebuild the infrastructure of farming and making sure that we empower these farmers because they most of them know what they're doing, but if they don't have money and they can't survive, of course they're going to go out and use chemically based products or try to figure out how to maximize something. But if they're taught, I know farmers who are teaching other farmers how to remediate their soils by
Hmm.
saying, hey, don't till, use compost, make sure that you farm. That there's a disconnect even with farming too, but I really believe the black farmers who were a part of building this country, all of the negativity and the negative energy that came along with even, we can say slavery, but post as
Yeah.
well. Like if
Yeah.
we were migrating and trying to get out of the South, we were disconnected from the soil altogether because we were trying to look for opportunity and liberate ourselves, right? We weren't trying to stay in these areas where we were forced free labor.
Yeah.
So if we redirect that and start building farming, the infrastructure of farming, and making sure that economically we have, it's no different than what Dr. King was saying and what Minister Malcolm was saying, the economics, whenever you look at economics and we have to think about what we're controlling, which wasn't a whole lot. And to this day, it's the same way. Like, what industries do we really control? What cities do we really control? At the end of the day, if you don't have investment, if you're not going to these black farmers and you're discriminating against them and saying, hey, well, we can't give you a loan to get these new tractors and this new equipment so you can sustain, why would a younger person want to be involved?
Let me ask you this: is there a point where, and Detroit is at the forefront, from my understanding, of urban farming? Is there a point where, as a community, we need to say, you know what, we need to transition from our typical farm, you got a gazillion acres, to what we've been doing over here on the east side, or in wherever in Detroit that's got urban farming going on? Can we sustain ourselves better that way? And that way we can kind of control it a little bit more from farm to market to table.
So you're asking, should we empower locally urban
Yes.
farmers?
And kind of transition as far as our dependence from, farmers that we may not necessarily see on a day-to-day basis, to farmers that live next door to us.
Yes, I believe that they said that, and I don't know the exact number, but they said like thousands of youth during Henry Ford's life as an adult. He employed the youth throughout the summer to grow specific, um, to work, to actually just be farm hands. At the end of the day, they worked on farms during summer breaks or whatever.
Mhm.
And I think that that movement in itself fueled research and so many other things back then when he was investing in farming in urban communities, right? But so many others were involved with urban farming too. But, our ancestors, it's an innate, it's in us, it's in a lot of us, our bloodline, to be able to understand how to garden, excuse me, how to farm. And I believe that if we had certain corridors in the city where we said, okay, we're going to grow some things indoor, because obviously the winter is going to come and weather could impact this, but some of the urban farming we could have that is seasonal. I
Mhm.
believe if we were able to invest in that, the city leadership over the last like 30, I'd say 30, 40 years, you had various people in different departments who believed in that. But
Mhm.
overall, the ordinances, and I applaud those who fought and, promoted and advocated for the change. But we need more of that, because everybody in every corridor of Detroit should be able to go to farmers market or to massive areas where we're growing in
Yeah.
abundance. Warehouses can be converted into growing, but again, the investment has to be there, because the pipeline, the workforce and the training will come if we build the infrastructure, and we have the feasibilities, and the research will support the movement, job training, workforce. But we have to be able to get the stakeholders in the community to invest in that so we can grow locally, because Myers and Gordon's and those stores will buy that too. They
Yeah.
have clauses and contracts with people where they buy locally. It's just not enough. At the end of the day, we don't have enough people doing it. But also, you and I should be able to, not just on Saturday, go to Easter Market. We should be able to go to markets throughout the year that are local, where
Yeah.
locally sourced food is grown, and the restaurants would participate in that as well. It's a local economy, in our world of environmental justice. We call it circular economy, because we're building an economy amongst ourselves and keeping it within a certain carbon footprint. So we all benefit from the byproducts and from workforce, and the economics of it. It's staying within a certain footprint, and we all benefit from it.
Like I remember as a kid, I grew up on 7 Mile in Southfield, and right there on the corner was I don't want to say a farm, but it was like our Eastern Market on 7 Mile. You go up there, you could get fresh fruit, you could get fresh vegetables, and this was something we literally would just walk up there and take it 5-10 minutes. That doesn't exist anymore. It's
Yep.
a matter of fact, Detroit has a mayoral race coming. Is there a particular candidate that you feel is more favorable to urban farming?
Not right now, I don't. I think I've had some great conversations with Mary.
Mhm.
Um, we've had, she's been very supportive. She's actually admitted to, like, wow, when I explained and shared, my background, she was very supportive. I believe that even when Duggan got in office, I don't think that it was presented to him in a way, and maybe it was. I don't know. I haven't been in all the rooms with environmentalists and agriculture, focused business-based organizations.
Mhm.
But I believe that you can't, and this may sound crazy, but you can't promote the environment when you want to implement an environmental agenda. You have to promote and advocate on how to save money or how to generate
Yeah.
revenue
Smoke and
first.
mirrors type shit.
Yeah, because it's like, with what I do, I have to simply just tell people, look, instead of sending this to the landfill, we waste 200, 300 billion dollars, right? I break that number down locally. I'm like, look at how many landfills we have in Michigan, but look at how many fuel terminals. So if we had the ability to produce cleaner sources of fuel with the same material, we could build a market around it, right? So our research at University of Michigan and Michigan State, we have a research team made up of biosystems, forestry, and University of Michigan School of Environment and Sustainability. That group, we have been on the ground, right, with each other, sharing ideas. My company, Detroit Dirt, was a business case. That's why research is so imperative, because you can help drive policy if you have the data that supports what you're
Yeah.
focusing on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Detroit is a beautiful, like the landscape here, all the vacant land. We have the ability to build out the infrastructure here. This is the perfect place to build the circular economy. It, like honestly,
You hire
with
homeless people to till the land. Like
huh?
I said, you can hire homeless people to actually work some of those urban farms. Like you could really, if you really look at it, you could save a lot of money and you could make a change through generations to come. And you can do something to kind of eradicate homelessness at the same time.
Yes, yes,
So
it can happen.
I do have a question. Has nothing to do with anything. I ask everybody the same question that comes on this show. Okay, so you are sitting on a park bench and God sits down next to you and he or she says you can ask them one question. What would it be?
Wow. I always look at myself as a messenger or a vessel, because I'm trying to get people connected back to agriculture and just understanding these markets.
Hmm.
I think my question would be, what do I need to do to revolutionize the land, to be able to sustain the land? What do I need to do? Because I have an idea, but from a
Hmm.
spiritual perspective, God probably has a whole different ingredient that can be shared with me on how to sustain the land, because the water, the soil, and air, all of it is connected. So I would want that ingredient. I really would like to know, how do we revolutionize the land, because everything is connected to it, right?
Yeah.
I understand it to a certain degree, but it's the argument that people have with AI today, right? The IQ of AI 6 months ago wasn't where it is today. 6 months from now is going to be, you and I can ask one of the platforms a question and they're going to compute or give us feedback based off of the data that they now have, that they didn't have a month ago or 30 or 45 days ago. So I think the power, I would want to know that, because I don't think anything is new under the sun. I believe I've traveled to Kemet, I've been to India, China, Japan, all these sacred ancient civilizations, and I believe that we have instructions in all of these different places, but the competition of religion and cultures have disrupted the energy, right, of us being able to connect to multiple dimensions. I've seen, you know, um, the hieroglyphs, and I've
What did
been,
it feel like?
huh?
What did you feel when you saw them?
I felt, I felt liberated, and I had a feeling of the joy that I experienced there. It was like looking at people, especially the further you go south, the original people of that land, the connection between them, and looking at the spiritual. I didn't want the tourist type Don't give me the people who are going to tell you, what you want to hear and that. I wanted to connect with those who understood how to translate. It's like what you and I were talking about with the science earlier, to translate
Mhm.
the science. When I saw the hieroglyphs, it really helped me understand religion as well, right? And I was like, okay, everybody took what they wanted to take from this area and interpreted and translated for what they want. But what I can see, the feeling that I'm getting, which is rewarding to see this other Trinity. I'm seeing a whole nother Trinity. I'm seeing that we as spiritual beings are supposed to be connected to nature. Love should be the real religion of us respecting and loving one another. But the love that I felt, and it was beautiful. It was one of those things where your mind is connected while you're there. You feel an energy that you don't normally feel. But if I can like explain it from a spiritual wealth perspective, I felt so wealthy because the information that was all around me,
Mhm.
I would have to at the end of the night meditate or take in what I saw, and I still haven't fully. But what was reflected in the hieroglyphs and the people, there was so much insight and dynamic and just light. You know, when they say that pineal gland is activated, I was definitely activated there because I was able to see Black goddesses. I was able to read about, instructions on not just being a better person, but making sure that I am constantly, you know, consistently working on elevation, traveling to a higher dimension, making the connection between our solar system, this earthly plane. And it's so much to learn, but it made me feel, as a Black, I always feel like we've been so many things in this country. We've been Negroes, we've been, colored,
Yeah.
we're Black, we're all these. I felt like I was at home in the sense of who we are, and I know that it exists here as well, because the narrative, it's a lie when they say that we all just came from one place. We were already existing in all of these different places, you know what I mean? So if your history is not truly being told, but you see dark hued people in Japan, Asia, India, you see dark hued people in the Aboriginal in Australia, you see dark hued people in South America. Those people all didn't come from one place. Those people were the original indigenous people of those lands. And so those pyramids that are promoted the most, that's just what the history, as they say, wanted people to understand or know. But
Yeah.
there's a feminine and masculine balance to the world. You can't have more of the other and expect for us to be in a balance. And that, what I experienced there in Kemet, opened up my eyes to these other destinations around the world, because that was shared as well. That
Mhm.
there's a direct connection, scientifically, mathematically, all of it is connected. But you have certain people interpreting because they want to control and translate the knowledge that they have. And I was sharing this earlier today. What AI is going to do, because there's the bad side of the coin, those who want to control it, who are greedy, and then
Yes.
there are those who understand it and they know the knowledge. They know the true answers to some things that people didn't think that we had the answers to. That information is out here, and that's the war, that's one of the wars that we're going to be fighting. Because if you can if people can make the connectivity from a spiritual perspective on how something was created, who were a part of these systems,
Mhm.
you can't diminish you and me. They can't diminish us, you and I. because we have this melanin, when an ancient civilization is telling us that that's a special group of people. They can erase all day long at the Smithsonian or do whatever they want to do, but the truth is always going to be revealed. There's nothing you can do about that. And what I got over there was respect. They respected me as a feminine energy. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
they know that we have been taken out of the Trinity. When you look at Asar and Aset, when you start looking at the dynamics of what these ancient civilizations, what they translate, they're not going to go out and promote all of, when you open up a Bible or Quran, most of these ancient civilizations, they practice what they preach.
Yeah,
They live it. They
yeah.
eat that way, they meditate. It's all on spiritual alignment, because you shift. The more dedication, the more discipline, the more light you're going to become, the more lighter you become, because you will elevate. You will make the true connection. But we have to seek that. I think a lot of times we take things from what it's worth, or we see something on the surface and it's like, oh, that looks good. But I know I've had heart surgeries, lung surgeries.
Wait. I'm sorry. I gotta stop you right there. What type of heart? I've had heart surgery before. So I had
So,
in 2020. I had a cabbage times four.
okay.
What'd you have done?
Wow. Okay. We're still here.
I, yo, and that shit freaks me the fuck out too. And I'm sorry, but I'm gonna say this: since my surgery, I have turned into a total punk. I am so emotional about
You're
everything.
emotional. Yeah.
Oh my fucking! So it's not just me.
Yeah. But that's see, the six, the heart, when you start looking at our chakras and how our body is made up, you had something happen to you, to that area, right? Our hearts were broken and they got amended, basically. And so the emotion of that is when we see certain things and it touches us, that happened to you for a reason, because you're actually aligned more with how your heart functions and what your heart really is, because it is the core of us, the brain and the heart, you know. But when we start breaking the body down from a spiritual perspective on what we should eat, how it functions, how it sustains us, it definitely I'm more emotional as well. So I I can relate to that. So at UCLA, I had a OSD occlusion where they said I must have been born with a hole in my heart. They said a
Okay.
lot of babies are born that way, but it eventually closes up. Now, I have dribbled basketballs up and down courts, soccer balls, did pretty much everything. And I don't know, I never had any issues, but I had a blood clot in 2015.
Hmm.
I had it already, but didn't know that I had it. And I had a pulmonary embolism. And from that
Oh shit.
pulmonary embolism, it restricted my blood flow. And it was an onset of
Yeah.
other other things that happened. But the heart was the first thing. They wanted to basically take this little parachute, and then it attaches to the wall, and then the heart, it starts, beating naturally the way that it's supposed to. But my breathing, because I had multiple clots all over my body, some of those clots started forming scar tissue in my lungs. And so University of Michigan, UCLA, they took care of me on the first phase. In University of Michigan, I had basically like an open heart surgery where you're in the heart lung machine, 8-hour surgery, almost nine
Whoa.
hours. Hmm?
It's just fascinated. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And what's so crazy about that surgery is they put your body to rest, right? And all I know is I just wanted to be on the other side. That's all I kept thinking is, if God will bless me to be here longer, I would rather have the surgery, and whatever the outcome is, And so my purpose, for me, it was purposeful. I was able to get an abundance from that. And I believe now that I'll be able to tie in some research with it as well, because our air is so polluted, the food lacks nutrients. There's so much going on in the environment across the world, right? I think that that's some of the reasons why some of us are getting sick, cancers, and you know, um, that are dying young, dealing with high blood pressure, cholesterol, all of these things. I don't think that food is the only, attributing it to food and bad practices, or not getting enough rest. I think it is actually the industry down the street that keeps putting all that pollution in the air. You know what I mean? Or the old infrastructure that's our water's flowing through. We can look at Flint and other communities across the country. We have to rebuild the infrastructure because it's killing the people. There are certain areas where people who look like you and me, the black and brown communities, who have been hit the hardest. And so when you talk about climate resiliency, we want to build resilient hubs and cities that are going to protect our people instead of causing, detrimental harm. Because when you start talking about cancer, and when the incinerator was here, and generations of black people dealing with asthma, and
Yeah.
they're like, we know why they were dealing with asthma. We know why a lot of our people are getting sick. It's not just our diets. That's not it. Because if you put air monitors and you started tracking a lot of the destruction, it will lead back to
Yeah.
what a lot of us are facing today.
Shit's intentional.
Yes.
Yeah. They want us sick. They don't want us to die because being sick, we make money. We don't
Yeah.
make any money when we're dead. So, they want to keep us in a nice little loop, little hamster wheel of emotional and physical illness, but not enough to really fuck you over and kill you.
Well, you got a point. I think that's the power that we have now today. The things that you're speaking on, we can order the books and go online. You can Google, research what you want today, and understand if you want to survive, and if you want, you know, to understand how you should be functioning and what's going on in your community. You have to be willing to learn and understand what's going on, because the reports and the data is out there. They can tell you by zip codes, just like they can change voting districts, gerrymandering and redlining, and that pollution and destruction the same way. As you said, some
Absolutely.
of it is intentional, like you
Yes.
said.
Uh, what, and I don't want to hold up too much of your time, but what
Oh, you're
exactly
fine, don't worry.
is Detroit dirt?
Repeat the question.
Is it Detroit Dirt, your company?
Yes.
What exactly is that?
So Detroit Dirt is made up, the mission and vision of Detroit is to promote the low carbon economy
Uh-huh.
through waste reduction efforts, like building markets around biomass. Biomass is organics, it's food, it's feedstock from farms, natural materials. But Detroit Dirt was created to address a few things in the city. One, we were shipping or sending our food waste, transporting our food waste to landfills. And so I wanted to align with corporations to address that issue as a pilot. And that pilot turned into like 12 years, right? General Motors, Blue Cross Blue Shield, a lot of spent grain from breweries, coffee shops, coffee grounds from coffee shops. I wanted to show the value of the waste stream, why it's valuable, and why, from a supply chain perspective, how we were wasting, right? So we wanted to be able to focus on that food waste, so to speak, which really is a resource, keep it within a certain mile radius, look at what was edible, what could be eaten, right? That could go to the homeless shelters or the schools. So there's a recovery aspect of it. We wanted to align with those who wanted to recover the food. We also wanted to align with municipalities, the county, whomever,
Mhm.
whoever saw this as a value. And then the zoo, they produce a lot of herbivore manure. The animals that eat lean griefy matter produce manure that can be processed as a compost or a fertilizer. So basically, we were taking collaborative partners, everybody who wanted to work with Detroit Dirt and promote a byproduct from the waste stream. That's what Detroit Dirt. There's so many other things. We created curriculums for K through 12 schools. I was in a couple of documentaries and a video, and that was used by 8,000 schools across the country and Kiss the Ground. That was called The Soil Story. And so that curriculum, we were getting young children to look at climate change from a soil perspective or from a waste reduction perspective. But, you know, I'm Detroit Dirt and Detroit Dirt is me. But the play on words, it really was how a lot of people saw Detroit too. That dirt part, you know, was a play on words because this was a heavily populated, the largest Black city in the country. And everywhere I went, you'd hear all these different stories about Detroit. Either people understood that this was a gem and a beautiful place with brilliant, you know, talent and ingenuity, or they didn't. Oh, Detroit, oh, Detroit. And they were like, why did you name it Detroit Dirt? I'm like, because that's how sometimes in society, Black people, that's how you look at Black people, as the
Good.
dirt. But at the same time, our ancestors are in that dirt and in that soil. They're the foundation of the country. So when you go into elite, when I go back home or go down south, I think about our ancestors who put all that time and effort, you know, to produce for all of us. We are the harvest of that soil, right? So at the end of the day, this was about, it wasn't just the composting. That's what people saw. But when they get me in a room and they're like, hey, we want you to address infrastructure or economics or public health, how does the public health align with this? Or what can we do around pollution? When they start having a conversation with me and dialogue and we engage with one another, they can see a completely different perspective on what all of us environmentalists, most of us are multidimensional. If you say you're for environmental justice, you understand policy is critical, you understand workforce, training, education, curriculums, all of it, right? The infrastructure, investment, economics, because the economics of this, that's what, you know, the greedy and those who, the control, the oligarchs, that's now what they're moving in on, right? They want to
Yeah.
control the natural resources because they understand how limited we are, but they want to control those natural resources. But we just have to tap into our inner self and know what we're supposed to be doing and what's within our control and come together. That's what we need to do in this city. I'm not saying that's the answer everywhere, but there's enough of us to do what needs to be done locally. Either
Okay,
we're going to
so
do it or not.
one more question. A 10th grader comes to you and they want to be you. What's your advice on their first step?
First of all, I would want to empower them to be them. I would encourage them to learn as much as they possibly could from me. But my job as someone who's older is to get them to see that they're just hitting the surface. If you're 16 or you're in 10th grade, you just haven't reached your pinnacle yet. So you might see someone on TV or in a magazine, but you can go further and do more than what that person can do. I admire the thousands of young people. I've been to probably 50 college universities, from the most prestigious institutions to small schools that people never heard of, to K through 12 schools. I was just in New York with a group of ninth, all girls school, 9th through 12th. Whenever I see young people, the biggest compliment is they're blown away by how, like, some of them who are science or mathematicians, they're like, well, how do I tie this in? I'm like, you know, economics, you know, the market, right? Y'all, you have access to everything. So how would you use your math to relate to climate? Would you be able to create an adaptation plan where you could help your community prepare for a storm or a flood? You know, are you, well, you know, I was thinking about becoming a doctor. I was thinking about becoming an attorney. You can go into environmental law. You can actually have dual degrees today. So medical health, our lungs, our heart, all that's being impacted by the destruction of the earth. So what I do is I make connectivity points for young people. I am always, you know, honored to have the respect of them seeing themselves in me or wanting to be like me. But when I was in India and I was with a bunch of teenagers, I told them maximize your potential, but bring that talent and that wealth back to India. Don't stay in the United States. Bring it back, you know, to your own country. So if I could encourage a 16-year-old, it would be today you might see someone that you admire, and it's okay to use them as a guide. But as you continue to grow and become an adult, you have to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are and like what you love, what's your passion, what drives you, because we all have purpose, all of us.
I'm still searching for mine. However, my time is ticking quickly. First off, I want to say I'm proud of you. If nobody's told you today,
Thank you.
and
Thank
I
you.
have learned a shitload today, and I can't possibly thank you enough. However, if there is something that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I got you.
Thank you.
Um, and shout out to Michigan. I sent a lot of money there for my daughter. One of my kids graduated from there.
Go
Uh,
blue.
yeah, I need to know what y'all gonna do with the whole DEI situation. I need to know. Just have to throw that out there.
It's real.
But it's just some real shit, you know. Oh, you know, I know I said last question, but I got one more before we go.
It's okay. You're
Is,
good.
is there a silver lining in the Trump administration as far as environmentalism is concerned?
Yes. I think that within the administration, I think they're so concerned about dismantling or changing things. But the mere fact that Doge has been created to address waste, right?
Mhm,
If I were on the team, I would be like, okay, if you found this waste in this department, let's take the money that you found and let's invest it back into the new system that we're going to build, right? So if you all are saying that you believe in energy, they're saying energy security. They don't want you to use the terminology that the Biden administration used, right? It's
mhm.
like, no, DEI. I'm like, if you unpack DEI, DEI is not what you're promoting and what you're saying that DEI is.
No.
If we're talking about merit, let's unpack merit for a second. If you're saying that a black person from the hood and a white person from an affluent community should both have be able to achieve something off of merit, meritocracy, if we break merit down, okay, you got a young man or young woman from the hood who has the talent, the skills, the ingenuity, all of that. The person from the affluent community or the person who can use their white skin to gain access to something, if you have someone from an affluent community whose parents have the resources, the money for training, to send them to the best tutors, to get them all the resources that they need, you can't say that merit, you should
Yeah.
be able to gain achievement off of merit. That's bullshit. At the end of the day, this is multi-layered. Diversity is key because the world is diverse. You know what I'm saying? The diversity, the biodiversity of animals and plants and how we eat our where we get our food from, all of this is diverse. So to say that DEI is a reason, I didn't gain anything from diversity, equity, inclusion. But I like the concept and the ideology of bringing people together and building systems where you're inclusive for all people. But merit merit is, that's a touchy subject, because when people unpack, even when they unpack DEI, yeah, some people may have had that within a clause of their guidelines for their company. We need to have equal opportunity. We're striving to help women, make the same wages, or employment opportunities and things of that nature. That's imperative, because the data shares with us we know as Black people the atrocities that we've been through, but we know all the imbalances of life. And when you start talking about biases, racism, systemic racism, constructs, all these systems have been put in place. No one can deny that. You can't deny it. But the solution is, I believe the Trump administration, I believe there are some leaders that, I grew up with some Republicans who are conservative. We didn't always agree on, necessarily, on politics, but I knew some of them who donated a lot of money to a lot of organizations, or
Yeah.
people who look like me,
Yeah.
gain something. And if the Trump administration wrote me a check tomorrow, I'd take it. But guess what I would do with it? I would make sure that Detroiters in this environment here locally would benefit from it. I'm not going to take the money somewhere or keep it for myself, because what's the point? I've defeated the purpose of my existence. But what I do know is, me personally, as a Black woman in America, like Minister Malcolm said, we are the ones who are treated the worst. This is just my perspective, and people can say, oh, Black women were able to get this in the last 10 years. We're still, when you look at our education compared to white males, we're like right there, right? We're second. Like, we're the most educated in this country, but we're still treated, it's like Michelle Obama said, when she left that south side of Chicago, and she entered into those Ivy League schools and started going in the rooms with the same people, you start seeing how valuable you are, and what kind of knowledge you truly have, and what you have to bring to the table, right? Our
Yeah.
children have to be told and taught how valuable they are, because our young women and our young men, we already know the statistics and the data behind that, but we have to empower them. And I think, I went off on a tangent, but I'm just saying, the Trump administration, if you're going to talk about the waste and the waste, that's all a lot of them are saying, it's wasteful. But if you're not going to have audits performed, you want to have audits performed on some of these businesses, but have audits performed on some of the departments within the government, because at the end of the day, you are letting go thousands of people. Thousands. The government is one of our largest employer.
Man,
Where
listen.
Yeah, where are these people gonna go? But just to answer your question, I think they have the ability to take that waste philosophy, because I have one, where let's minimize the waste, but let's do something with the money that you have recovered from the waste, and let's build new systems. Let's do it. Because as a Black person, Democrat, Republican, I don't subscribe to either. I'm purple.
Yeah, yeah, they all. It's the same fucking coin to me. They just go about it different ways. On that note, I'm gonna wrap it up. I can't possibly, like I said, I can't thank you enough. This has been a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful tutorial on how to teach an idiot myself the greatness of sustainable culture and our food system. So thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing. It is much, much, much needed. And I know it doesn't always seem like people give a shit, but there are people out there that do, like myself. I want my
They do.
grandkids to be able to eat some shit that they like, and is not going to make their forehead evaporate as soon as they eat it.
Thank you again. You are not an idiot. So don't say that, and don't put that in the universe. You are not. And thank you for allowing me to share this space with you, and share, information and knowledge and whatnot. As long as we keep engaging with one another, we're going to be okay because we all can learn from each other.
Absolutely. Although I am not an idiot. You are right. So on that note, I'm out of here. God bless you. You have a phenomenal day on purpose. And you are whenever you want to come back and just talk food, let me know.
Thank you. Peace and blessings to you and love.
No
Thank
doubt. And
you.
that's Passion Murray. That's not Pashon. It's Passion.
Passion Murray at Passion Murray at Detroit Dirt.
Get it together. Go fix your soul in your life. Anyway, we out of here. Y'all have a good one. And this has been another episode of Intellectually Petty Radio, and I am your host, Jobs. Y'all already know, blah 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 blah. Y'all have a good one, and and on this note, let me just say, I've been doing this a decade. I was doing this podcasting thing before it was a podcasting thing, and I have it never ceases to amaze me the beauty of our people. One thing I have never done is got a black person on this show to tear that black person down, and that's never going to happen. It may cost me some views, it may cost me some money, it may cost me some time on your screen, and I don't really give two fucks. When our people come on here, I want them to feel comfortable, I want them to feel safe, and I want them to feel powerful. And I think that I have done a good job at accomplishing those feelings. I encourage you, if you're out there doing something for our community, to keep it up. There is always somebody watching you, whether you know it or not. Sometimes you feel unappreciated, and I'm gonna tell you right now that you are appreciated. We just sometimes don't have the pom poms to celebrate you when we should. So I'm proud of you, even if I don't know you, even if I've never met you, even if I haven't seen you and never will. If you are doing something for somebody that looks like me, I'm proud of you and I love you, and you have a good fucking day on purpose. I'm out of here.